This is our exclusive interview with the filmmakers about the film, making of the film. So we'd just like to ask, since you were there present during the March to Tibet in Dharamsala and the torch rally in San Francisco, I'm just wondering, what was it like being there and doing those interviews and filming?
Yeah, so the March to Tibet started from Dharamsala on 10th March, and we were both there to film the beginning of the march. And then over the next 4 months, I visited the march a number of times. In fact, I spent like one chunk of almost like 2 weeks with the marchers when they were arrested by the police, or when they were blockaded by the police. Being with the march was really, really an inspiring time for me, because most of the marchers were young Tibetans who had come from Tibet in the last 10 years. They were all determined to go back to Tibet. They really believed they were going to go back to Tibet. And I just found their spirit and their sense of, having to do something for Tibet really inspiring. What was interesting about that, particularly for us, was how these Chinese students who are studying in the West, who've been like in America for 3-4 years, hold so firmly to their government's view on Tibet, even though they might be critical of the Chinese, the Communist Party in other aspects. But when it comes to Tibet, they just completely believe what the government's telling them, and that really was surprising to us to see.
And the interview that we used in our film, obviously the Chinese student had downloaded all the information from a website. So he was kind of reading that. And so it was so completely obvious to us that he was just reading what was being told to him by the Chinese websites and the Chinese government. So that was very, very obvious.
See, when we set out to make this film, one of our goals was to really direct this film or to aim this film to a Tibetan community. Because I think within the Tibetan community, there's like a real hesitation to really like frankly discuss options for the future. Most Tibetans are still happy to say, well, whatever the Dalai Lama wants, we're happy to do it. But no one's thinking like, hey, maybe this thing is going to go on for much longer than His Holiness's lifetime, and maybe we need to start talking about alternative options. And the hope with this film was to kind of provoke that discussion, to present different options, different points of view, and to provoke that. As far as Chinese are concerned, absolutely, I think it's really important for Chinese to see the film. And when we were in Prague recently, there was a Chinese dissident lawyer, Li Xiangbing, who was on one of the juries, and he saw the film and he told us that he thought it was really important for Chinese people to see this film, because he had learned so much from this film. He had learned so much that he didn't know. For instance, that his government was like lying to the Chinese people. So yeah, I think it would be really useful for Chinese to see this film.
And we are making a Tibetan language and Chinese language DVDs, and so the idea is that the DVDs will go into Tibet and China, and people will be able to see the film. So we'd been in touch with by email, actually through Skype, and she was like, "Come and interview me. I'm really happy to talk." And we were really worried because we were concerned about her and we didn't want to endanger her in any way. But she was like, no, I'm really happy doing this. I understand what this implies. And so we just got a visa, as tourists, and went to film her. And she was completely open. She just seemed to have no fear. She really didn't. I guess the thing about her is she doesn't care too much about herself. She's not thinking about herself. She's thinking about Tibet and the larger cause. And so she felt that this film was going to be useful. And so we spent about 4 days with her. And we went out together, we filmed her at home, and we got to know each other quite well. Despite our poor, her poor English and my poor Tibetan, we actually got to know each other quite well. So that was a wonderful experience.
The thing about Vasera was when you met her, you felt like you'd known her all your life, because she's this sort of really bubbly, person full of life, like almost childlike in her kind of, joyous nature, ready to laugh and like really happy, friendly. And she was also really excited to meet us, because I guess we were one of the first people from India, Tibetans from India, who she had encountered. So she had all these questions about, what's life like in Dharamsala, what do people think? And so we spent 4 days, just talking non-stop, just talking about each other's lives, and it was really, really an inspiring moment for us.
Yeah. And she'd also seen our film Dreaming Lhasa like 6 times. Like she'd sort of learnt about exile world, Dharamsala world, by watching that film. So she had so many questions about it. So that was kind of interesting for us too, because she really knew what we'd been doing. Well, Tenzing and I started working as filmmakers in the 80s, so it's been over 20 years. And each project is very long and it's a lot of effort, but I guess we always think about, I think for me it's always like, I know that the Tibetan people are right and I know they deserve, justice, and I think that that's what motivates us. So it's not like we have to even think about it actively, but every time we hear stories, it's like, that's the first thing. It's like, that's not right. I mean, how can we let these people sort of be, eradicated or their culture be destroyed in front of our eyes? So that always keeps us going. Is that right?
Yeah, I think basically, our work and our life are completely intertwined. I mean, there's no separation, because our life is about being Tibetan, being an exiled Tibetan, working for or towards the freedom of Tibet, and so our work obviously reflects that. So I think in the last 20 years we've made maybe 15 or 16 films, and almost every one of them has been about Tibet in some form or another.